You have probably never thought about why humans smoke in the first place. Not why you personally smoke, why humans as a species ever started at all. Because smoking makes no obvious sense when you think about it carefully. You are literally putting burning hot smoke directly into your own lungs deliberately. No other animal on Earth does anything remotely close to this willingly. And yet, humans have been doing this for longer than civilization has even existed. The story of smoking does not start with tobacco or cigarettes or any farm. It starts with fire. And fire goes back at least 1 million years. 1 million years ago, in a cave called Wonderwork in South Africa, something happened. Ancient humans gathered around a burning fire for the very first time in history. They were not smoking intentionally, they were just sitting next to the flames. But certain plants were burning in that fire and releasing something into the air. That something drifted directly into the lungs of every person sitting around it. And some of those people felt something they had never felt before in their lives. A strange calm settled over them. Fear reduced the world, felt slightly different. They did not understand what had happened, but they wanted to feel it again. This was the very first accidental encounter humans ever had with psychoactive smoke. And it planted a seed inside the human brain that never fully went away. Now, to understand why this mattered, we need to understand something about the human brain. The human brain is always searching for ways to feel better than it currently does. This is not a flaw, it is actually a survival mechanism built deep inside us. Anything that reduces fear, increases calm, or creates pleasure gets remembered and repeated immediately. The ancient humans sitting around that fire remembered exactly how the smoke had felt. So the next time certain plants were available, they put them directly into the fire. This was not random, this was the very first intentional experiment with smoking ever. But this raises an important question: which plants were actually causing these effects? The answer depends entirely on where in the world these ancient humans were living. In Central Asia, the plant most commonly burning near ancient campfires was cannabis. Cannabis, when burned, releases compounds that directly affect the human brain in powerful ways. Ancient humans had no idea what cannabis was, they just knew the smoke felt different. In North America, different plants with different psychoactive properties were growing everywhere naturally. In Africa and the Middle East, yet another set of plants produced effects when burned. Every ancient human group around the world independently discovered the same basic thing separately. Burning certain plants and breathing, the smoke changes how the human mind and body feels. This independent discovery across every continent tells us something incredibly important about human nature. The desire to alter how we feel is not a modern weakness or personal failure at all. It is something so fundamental to being human that every culture discovered it completely independently. Some researchers call this the intoxication hypothesis, and it is more serious than it sounds. The hypothesis suggests that seeking altered states of consciousness is a basic human drive, not a choice or a bad habit. A drive as fundamental as hunger or thirst. Just like hunger pushes you toward food, the intoxication drive pushes humans toward altered states. This does not mean every human smokes, it means the desire exists inside all of us. And ancient humans expressed the drive through the most available tool they had: fire and plants. Now let us talk about the first real archaeological evidence of intentional smoking ever discovered. In the Pamir Mountains on the border of modern-day Afghanistan and Tajikistan, something was found. Ancient burial sites dating back to around 500 BC contained wooden braziers inside them. Those braziers contained burned cannabis seeds and cannabis plant material deliberately placed inside. This was not accidental. Someone deliberately burned cannabis inside a sealed burial chamber intentionally. This means by 500 BC smoking was already a deliberate ritual practice with clear purpose. But the actual history of intentional smoking goes back much, much further than 500 BC. In North America, researchers found evidence of tobacco use dating back 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years ago, that is 10,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids were even built, the evidence was found in the Great Salt Lake Desert in the state of Utah. Ancient seeds and residue found there confirm that tobacco was being deliberately used that long ago. This completely changes how we think about smoking as a human behavior and practice. Smoking is not a modern habit that got out of control. It is an ancient human behavior. A behavior so old it predates writing, agriculture, cities, and almost everything we call civilization. But here is what makes ancient smoking completely different from what we think of today. Ancient humans did not smoke casually the way a modern person might light a cigarette. For most of ancient human history, smoking was an incredibly serious and sacred act. It was used almost exclusively in ritual contexts, ceremonies, prayers, and communication with spirits. The smoke itself was not seen as something entering the lungs of the person smoking. It was seen as a message, a physical thing being sent from the human world upward toward whatever gods or spirits or forces the ancient group believed were watching them. Smoke rises, it moves upward, it disappears into the sky above. This felt meaningful. In almost every ancient culture around the world, smoke became associated with prayer and communication. The burning of sacred plants to create smoke was one of the most universal human rituals. From ancient Egypt to ancient India to the Americas, smoke meant the same basic thing everywhere. Something important is being sent upward from the human world to whatever exists above us. This is why incense exists in almost every major religion that has ever existed on Earth. The incense burning in ancient temples was doing the exact same thing as those first campfires. Humans creating smoke as a way of communicating with something larger than themselves always. Now let us talk about the medicinal use of smoke, because this is equally fascinating. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, dating back nearly 4,000 years, mention smoking as a treatment. These texts describe patients inhaling smoke from burning herbs through reeds placed in their mouths. The conditions being treated included respiratory problems, headaches, and various forms of pain and discomfort. This seems counterintuitive today. Using smoke to treat breathing problems sounds completely backwards. But certain plant compounds, when burned and inhaled, do actually have real, measurable medicinal effects. Ancient Greek physicians also recorded using smoke inhalation as a medical treatment for sick patients. Hippocrates himself, the father of modern medicine, mentioned smoke therapy in his medical writings. In ancient India, the medical system called Ayurveda included detailed smoking protocols for treating illness. Specific plants were recommended for specific conditions and specific amounts of smoke for specific durations. This was not guesswork, it was a sophisticated medical system built through centuries of observation. Ancient humans had figured out through trial and error which plants did what when burned. They had no chemistry, no labs, no microscopes, but they had thousands of years of experience. That accumulated experience produced surprisingly accurate knowledge about the effects of different plant smokes. Some of those ancient plant smoke remedies have since been confirmed by modern scientific research. The knowledge was real, even if the ancient explanation for why it worked was wrong. Now let us talk about something that almost nobody considers when thinking about ancient smoking practices. Shared smoking was one of the most powerful social bonding tools that ancient humans ever developed. Think about what happens when a group of people share something intensely physical and mind-altering together. They experience the same altered state at the same time in the same place together. This creates a powerful sense of shared experience and connection that is very difficult to fake. Researchers call this kind of shared experience social technology, a tool for building group trust. And trust was not just nice to have in the ancient world, it was essential for survival. A group that trusted each other completely could coordinate hunting, defense, and resource sharing far better. A group full of suspicion and distrust would fall apart under the pressure of ancient survival. Shared smoke rituals gave ancient groups a reliable way to build and reinforce that essential trust. Everyone who participated in the ritual was signaling, "I am part of this group completely." That signal was powerful enough that it became embedded in cultures across the entire ancient world. Now, let us talk about how smoking moved from ritual into something more regular and everyday. The transition happened slowly over thousands of years in different places at different times. As agriculture developed, humans began deliberately growing plants they knew produced useful smoke effects. This was a massive shift from finding these plants in the wild to actively farming them. Tobacco in the Americas was one of the first plants ever deliberately cultivated specifically for smoking. Ancient farmers in South America were growing tobacco as a crop at least 3,000 years ago. This tells us that by this point, smoking had become important enough to justify dedicated farming. You do not farm something unless it has serious value to your community and daily life. Tobacco farming spread northward through the Americas over centuries, following human migration patterns exactly. Every new group that encountered tobacco adopted it almost immediately into their existing ritual practices. This rapid adoption across completely different cultures tells us something important about human psychology. The effects of tobacco smoke on the human brain are powerful enough to cross all cultural barriers. It did not matter what language you spoke or what gods you believed in or where you lived. The smoke worked the same way on every human brain it encountered, regardless of background. Now let us talk about the pipe, because the pipe changed everything about how humans smoked. Before pipes existed, smoking required holding burning plant material directly and inhaling from it awkwardly. The pipe allowed smoke to cool slightly before entering the lungs, making the experience more comfortable. Ancient pipes have been found across North America, dating back over 2,000 years consistently. These pipes were not simple, rough objects. Many were incredibly ornate and carefully crafted works. The level of craftsmanship put into ancient pipes tells us exactly how sacred smoking was considered. You do not spend weeks carving a beautiful ceremonial object for something you consider unimportant. The pipe was treated with the same reverence that other cultures gave to religious objects and symbols. In many Native American cultures, the pipe was literally considered a sacred living being with spiritual power. Sharing a pipe with someone was one of the most serious and meaningful acts possible between people. Breaking a pipe, or misusing one, was considered a serious offense against the spiritual world itself. Now let us cross the ocean and look at what was happening with smoke in the ancient Middle East. In ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, incense was everywhere. Temples burned specific plant mixtures continuously as a way of maintaining contact with the gods above. The word perfume itself actually comes from the Latin words meaning through smoke perfumum. This tells us that our entire concept of pleasant scent originated from the burning of sacred plants. Ancient Mesopotamian priests kept detailed records of which plants to burn, for which specific purposes. Different gods apparently preferred different plant smokes, and burning the wrong one was a serious mistake. This level of specificity tells us that ancient people were paying extremely close attention to smoke effects. They were noticing differences between plant smokes that modern science has only recently begun to confirm. In ancient Egypt, the connection between smoke and the divine was equally powerful and well documented. Egyptian temples burned a specific incense mixture called kaifi that contained at least 16 different ingredients. Kaifi was burned every evening as the sun set as a daily ritual, without exception ever. Ancient texts describe kaifi as having the ability to lull people into peaceful sleep and pleasant dreams. Modern analysis of kaifi ingredients shows it contains several compounds known to have sedative properties today. The ancient Egyptians had figured out a sedative smoke mixture thousands of years before modern pharmacology existed. Now let us move to ancient Greece, where smoking and medicine became deeply intertwined in fascinating ways. Ancient Greek physicians believed that many diseases entered the body through the air a person breathed. If disease came in through the air, then medicine could logically also enter through the air too. This led Greek physicians to develop elaborate smoke inhalation treatments for a wide range of conditions. Patients would sit in enclosed spaces while specific plants burned and filled their lungs with the smoke. Some of these treatments were genuinely effective because the plants contained real, active medicinal compounds. Others were completely ineffective, but the patients believed in them, which sometimes produced real placebo effects. Either way, the practice of medical smoke inhalation was taken completely seriously by Greek medical professionals. Dioscorides, a Greek physician, wrote an entire encyclopedia of medicinal plants, including detailed smoking instructions. That encyclopedia was used as a medical reference across Europe and the Middle East for 1,500 years. Now let us jump forward and talk about what happened when Europe first encountered tobacco from the Americas. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, they witnessed something completely unfamiliar. The indigenous people of the Caribbean were rolling dried leaves into tubes and setting them on fire. Then they were putting the burning end of those tubes into their mouths and inhaling deeply. The Spanish observers were completely baffled by what they were seeing for the very first time. Some thought it was a form of medicine, some thought it was a religious ritual, some were disgusted. But a few curious sailors decided to try it themselves and immediately understood why it was done. Those sailors brought tobacco seeds back to Europe, and the entire world was never the same again. Tobacco spread across Europe with remarkable speed for something that had no modern marketing behind it. Within decades of its introduction, tobacco was being grown, sold, and smoked across the entire European continent. This speed of adoption tells us something important. The human brain responded to tobacco immediately and powerfully. Europeans had no cultural preparation for tobacco, no ritual context, no sacred tradition, no medicinal framework, and yet they adopted it instantly anyway because the neurological effects worked regardless of cultural context. This confirmed what ancient humans had discovered accidentally around campfires 1 million years earlier. The human brain responds to certain plant smokes in ways that go beyond culture or personal choice. Now here is where the story takes a very dark and important turn that we cannot ignore. In the ancient world, smoking was controlled by ritual, by ceremony, by medicine, by social tradition. There were rules about when you smoked, how much you smoked, and what you smoked with. These rules were not arbitrary. They were the result of thousands of years of hard experience. Ancient cultures had figured out through painful trial and error how to use these plants responsibly. But when tobacco entered the European commercial system, all of those ancient guardrails were removed completely. There was no sacred context, no ritual limitation, no elder telling you how much was enough. There was only a product being sold by people who wanted to sell as much as possible. Tobacco companies in the centuries that followed became extraordinarily good at maximizing consumption and dependency. They bred tobacco plants specifically to contain higher and higher levels of addictive compounds over time. They added chemicals to cigarettes specifically designed to make the nicotine hit the brain faster. They marketed cigarettes to women, to children, to soldiers, to doctors, to absolutely everyone possible. They hired scientists to produce research suggesting cigarettes were safe when they knew the opposite was true. They spent decades hiding evidence that their product was killing the people who used it daily. This was not the ancient human relationship with smoke. This was something entirely different and darker. Ancient humans used smoke as a tool. Modern tobacco companies turned humans into tools for profit. The sacred plant that ancient shamans used carefully became a mass-produced industrial addiction product. The transition from sacred ritual to commercial addiction is one of the most significant moral shifts in history. Now, let us come back to the science, because the science here is genuinely fascinating and important. Why does tobacco specifically become so addictive when so many other plant smokes do not? The answer lies in a molecule called nicotine and what it does inside the human brain. Nicotine mimics a natural brain chemical called acetylcholine that is involved in attention and reward. When nicotine enters the brain, it triggers a release of dopamine, the brain's primary reward chemical. Dopamine makes you feel good. It is the same chemical released when you eat or succeed at something. But nicotine triggers dopamine release faster and more intensely than almost any natural activity ever could. The brain notices this powerful dopamine hit and immediately starts wanting to repeat the experience again. Over time, the brain actually changes its structure to expect nicotine as part of its normal operation. Without nicotine, the brain starts signaling distress. This is what withdrawal actually is at the cellular level. Ancient humans who smoked occasionally in ritual contexts never reached this level of neurological dependency. The occasional ritual use did not give the brain enough exposure to rewire itself around the substance. But daily commercial smoking gives the brain exactly enough exposure to completely restructure itself around nicotine. This is the crucial difference between ancient smoking and modern smoking that almost nobody talks about. It is not the smoke itself that created the addiction epidemic, it is the frequency and intensity. Ancient humans accidentally discovered something powerful and developed careful cultural systems to manage that power. Modern commercial interests deliberately stripped away those management systems to maximize profit from human vulnerability. Now let us talk about something that connects ancient smoking to something much bigger about human nature. Why do humans seek altered states of consciousness in the first place at all? This question goes deeper than smoking. It touches something fundamental about what it means to be human. Every human culture throughout all of recorded history has developed some method of altering consciousness. Some used plants, some used rhythmic drumming, some used fasting, some used extreme physical exertion. The methods vary enormously, but the underlying goal is remarkably consistent across all cultures, always. Humans want to temporarily step outside their normal conscious experience and feel something different entirely. Researchers who study this call it the universal human drive toward transcendence, and it is well documented. Transcendence means stepping beyond your ordinary self, feeling connected to something larger than your daily experience. Smoke was one of the earliest and most accessible ways ancient humans found to achieve this feeling. The altered state produced by certain plant smokes felt like contact with the divine to ancient minds. Because they had no scientific framework to explain what was happening, they explained it spiritually instead. The plant smoke was not just changing brain chemistry, it was opening a door to another world. This spiritual interpretation was not stupid or primitive. It was the most logical explanation available then. And it produced real social and psychological benefits that kept communities together and functioning effectively. It gave leaders and healers a tool for managing group psychology and maintaining social cohesion reliably. These were not small benefits. These were survival advantages that helped ancient groups outlast their competitors. The groups that had effective ritual practices, including smoke ceremonies, were more cohesive and more successful overall. This may be one reason why smoke rituals spread so consistently and persistently across the ancient world. They were not just spiritually meaningful, they were practically effective at keeping human groups alive and together. Now we are getting close to the end of this story, and it is worth stepping back completely. We started 1 million years ago, with ancient humans accidentally inhaling smoke around a prehistoric campfire. We have traveled through ritual and medicine and social bonding and commerce and neuroscience to get here.